Hello, something a little bit different this time around on Risky Bitness. I'm going to do a tutorial on PlayStation 2 emulation. So what we're going to look at is a couple of quick things. First, I just wanted to show you the recommended and minimum requirements. I have them up on the screen now. As you can see, you're really going to want Windows 10 or higher. If you're still running Windows 7, it's time to upgrade. Also, you're going to want to have a SSE2 or AVX2 support CPU. What does that mean? Nothing really out of the ordinary. I mean, you can look at the specs of your processor and see if they match up with this, but odds are they most likely do. Any modern CPU is going to have these features. If you're running a budget CPU, you might have some issues, but any reasonably good CPU is going to have these features. As far as memory, the memory requirements aren't too strict. If you have a gaming PC, you probably already have at least 8 gig RAM. If you don't have at least 8 gig RAM, then you're going to want to upgrade for this. RAM is, I don't want to say it's cheap right now, but it's reasonably cheap to upgrade your RAM on if you have a desktop. So something that's definitely worth doing if you want to start emulating any kind of 3D graphics or even just playing games at all. Bottom line, if you have a gaming PC, you should be able to run it even if your gaming PC is a few years old. I've run this on multiple PCs. I've run this on gaming PCs with 8800 GT and 8600 GTS. So we're talking about like 10 years ago I was running this on various PCs and it ran. So as long as you have a decent PC with a gaming card, you're probably alright. I should say with a video card, you're probably alright. I wouldn't worry about it too much. So that out of the way, I'm just gonna pop over to my other tab here. And I will put this in the description. Now, you can go to the PCSX2 website and download the binary and download the plugins yourself. All of that is a lot of trouble. And if you're not a very technical person and you're not really into kind of fiddling with things and figuring them out, it's not something you're going to want to do. So in order to facilitate that, I feel like it's much easier to just go to these BuildBot PSX2 automated builds. And these are all automated builds that are created by somebody who goes by the name Orphis. And if you look at these dates in this column, you'll see that they are pretty frequent. He updates these a lot. He or she, I shouldn't presume. And bottom line is, this is the best way to get right into PCSX2 without having to do a lot of configuration. So you're going to want to download whatever the most recent build is. There's always improvements, and you can see here there's a commit log that gives you a little quick and dirty update status. If you click on the link, it'll give you a much more in-depth, highly technical GitHub of everything that's been done here. This, to me, I don't understand any of what this says. This is even highly technical for me, so I wouldn't concern yourself too much with this unless you're into coding and programming, in which case this is probably pretty cool for you. But for me, I'm really just more interested in the performance. I want to see what it does. Once you've downloaded your build, you're going to go ahead and just extract that. I like 7-zip. That's my favorite compression utility. You can download it for free, and it handles pretty much every type of compression archive. So I think it's pretty great. I'm going to do an extract here. I usually rename this folder. And from here, you don't really have to do anything. All you have to do is get a BIOS. You have to create a folder called BIOS and stick it right here. Now, I happen to already have a BIOS. I'm going to drag that over to the other screen here. And I'm going to get the BIOS. Now while I'm getting the BIOS, I understand that in order to be successful on YouTube, it is required that one should have humor in their videos. So to that end, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and make a joke. So this is my 4-year-old son's favorite joke. You ready? You ready to laugh? You're going to subscribe after you hear this, because you're going to want more. You want more of this kind of joke. How do you make a tissue dance? You put a little boogie in it. That's it. That's the joke. there's a bunch of garbage files in there that I probably don't need. Alright, so we brought over our BIOS. You will have to get your own BIOS. I can't help you out with that. That's a copyright issue. For all intents and purposes, a BIOS should come directly from the firmware on your existing PlayStation 2 hardware. So I've opened it up. The language selector, system default, I mean, you can change this to your preferred language. I just put English because that's what I speak. Now from here, if you click next, boom, nothing's going to happen because all of this has already been configured for you. Select your BIOS, make sure you're using the correct one, and you are ready to play. Once you've selected your game and you have your ISO loaded up, then you're going to go ahead and click on PCSX2 and then boot ISO. So once you've got your game running, you're just going to go ahead and double click it to make it full screen. And of course we have all of our options. I'm going to select a new game.
Beast, I will send you back to the depths of Hades.
So you'll see that the game doesn't look fantastic right now because we have no hardware acceleration on. It's just being stretched from its original resolution. But it looks decent. It's perfectly playable. And when you're done playing, just double click. Click the X. And that's all she wrote. And that's really it for now. By default, it already has a controller set. So if you use any X input device, whether that's an Xbox 360 controller or any number of other PC compatible controllers, automatically it should work. This is my favorite kind of controller. This is the 8-bit Do SN30 Pro Plus. But you could also use a DualShock if you want a more authentic feel. You can use an Xbox 360 controller, really any number of controllers, and it's already set up, so you don't even have to configure that. There are a lot of configuration options in this emulator, depending on what plugin you're using. So it's just something to bear in mind that these plugins can be used a number of different ways. I don't want to get too into it now, but I'm going to look really quickly into the video settings just to show that by default, we have everything set with no hardware acceleration. And that's for compatibility. You can make the games look a lot cooler and a lot better by using hardware acceleration, but that's going to be for another video. If you want to learn more about the different settings, then that's absolutely something that I can cover in another video. If you're curious about whether a game's going to work or how well it's going to work, there's a wiki for that. And the reason why you might be curious about that is because you'll notice that some games do have issues. You might have buggy textures or effects that don't work properly. Sometimes the color looks all weird. And there's a number of things that can possibly go wrong, broken lines down the screen. And there are ways to fix all those things by changing the configuration. And you can find that in the PCSX2 Wiki. So if there's ever a game that looks weird or doesn't run very well, you're going to want to check in here and see. So we were looking at God of War before, so if I look up God of War here, it's going to show us a bunch of information about different testing that people have done. So these are all test configurations that people have done. Of course, it gives you the basic game information here, but this is really the meat and potatoes of what we're looking for. And it tells us that people using these plugins had these experiences. The only thing I dislike about this is that they're not dated. So it gives you the revision of the plugins, but it doesn't give you the date of the test. So you don't really know for sure, when it was done or how much things have changed since then unless you look at your plugins. But for now, you can look at these comments and get a pretty good idea about how the game's going to work. And this is a good hint too. If they're using Windows 10, obviously it's a newer build. And they even have a little tab here where it tells you what their settings were. Look, playable with full 60 frames per second. And if I look at their graphics settings, it tells me the graphics settings, internal resolution 2x native. So it tells you exactly what settings these individuals testing the game used to achieve their results, which is really, really super helpful. Shadows working, no visual artifacts. So we know that this game works, and we know it works especially if we use these settings that these people use. And this is awesome because you look at the settings that they're using, and it breaks down everything for you. So that might be another video if you're interested in that. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a video of like looking at a game that maybe needs some tweaking and tweaking the settings to make that work. Even a specific game, if somebody has a specific game and I see, you know, multiple people asking for the same game, or if I just don't get that many comments and there's like one person asking for one game, then I'll pop on that game, we'll pop on the wiki, and I'll go through the settings and changing them to make it make sense. But all this plugin stuff, most of it's already done for you with the builds, so you don't have to worry about it. That's it. Have a good one. Thank you once again for watching, and until next time, game over.